We're going to start by looking at, does homeopathy get a fair hearing? Hands up if you think it does. But I think we're really, really lucky to have Professor Robert Hahn, who is going to open the conference and has been courageous enough to, as a conventional researcher, to be willing to just look with an open eye at the evidence for homeopathy. And he's going to tell us the story of how difficult that is in this day and age just at the moment, but how things could be breaking through to a different and more positive time for homeopathy. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this nice introduction. Robert Hahn, yeah, I'm a physician and I'm an anesthetist. I worked in the operating room for 15 years full time, and then in the beginning of the 1990s I turned to academic work. So I've been a clinical researcher in anesthesia, surgery and urology for the past 25 years. So I come in to you for a little from the side, so I would like to thank you all for allowing me to be here. It will be a very interesting weekend indeed for me. Many new things to learn, and in particular, of course, I would like to thank the organizers for making this possible for me to visit you. My hometown is Stockholm, Sweden. But I don't work there anymore. Actually, I've turned to this hospital, Södertälje Hospital, about 25 kilometers south of the Stockholm center. So this is the southern outskirts of the Stockholm area. The hospital is here, and the city is really to the right here, so you don't see it. But if we move on 25 kilometers or 15, 20 kilometers down further south, we come to another hospital. We come to the Vidar Clinic. It's the only anthroposophic hospital in Scandinavia. And it really has a lovely architecture, very inspiring architecture, as you can see here. But unfortunately, it's just been closed down. A lot of people got fired. It's a very sad story for my community, indeed. And there's a lot of writing, of course, in the papers, and it was fully a work of the Skeptics organization. It has been out for closing this entity down for many, many years, although they got very good results. It was financially effective. The public hospital could send patients there that they didn't cure in the way they hoped. But the politician in charge of the healthcare in Stockholm has for many years been arguing that this should be closed down, and it's not because of the results, but because of the medication, which she claims is fake, no use. Here she is. I followed her blog for some time, and I can see that her wording is very typical of the skeptics movement. She called the homeopathy that they use not very extensively, but it's used at this hospital. They call it fake medication. They say that they are cheaters. That kind of wording is not used at the university, but it's used by her and it's used by the skeptics. So that's just a consequence of it. This is the founder of this skeptics movement in Sweden, and he's been arguing for 30 years that anthroposophy and homeopathy has nothing to offer society. The skeptics movement has been very active, and the reason why I got interested in this topic was that they had a show on television in 2011 when this astronaut, a Swedish astronaut actually, he was sitting in television and claiming that homeopathy had absolutely no effect whatsoever. And there was also a bunch of young boys, 17, 18-year-old boys sitting around a table with shirts on them, say, I'm a skeptic. Yeah. And they said there's absolutely no study whatsoever showing that homeopathy has effect. And then I became to wonder, how do they know this? How can young boys, 18-year-old boys know this? Does Anders Fuglsang, this astronaut, can he read the medical literature? And who does? Does the politician read the literature? She doesn't have any medical education. This philosopher, does he read the literature? He doesn't have any education in this field at all. And it does take some experience to be able to read the literature. They just lend themselves to these claims. And it's just a young boys, there's not a single study showing that homeopathy is effective. Made me a little interested in taking a look in the field. And I also was a little shocked that people can lend themselves to these statements without really being able to look at the literature themselves. If we take a look at the skeptics organization in my country, there is not a very large organization, 3,000 people. They are just anybody. They can be school teachers, mathematicians, and they're often on the margin of science, but they're not really scientists. They don't work with these topics. They are not educated in medical science, but they have a lot of opinion about it. So they're omnipotent. They go over borders very, very easily, much more easily than an educated scientist would ever do. They have extremely good hand with media. The media believes them because they present themselves as scientists. And they truly believe that they do this in the interest of science. They believe that, which I don't think. I don't think they have any role at all. But it's more an activist organization, and we should know this. Okay, so my look into the literature resulted in this paper published in 2013, and we now got to take a look at the key results here. The first study that challenged is homeopathy more effective, or does it have any effect, was this meta-analysis from 1997 by Linde. He identified 89 studies and compared homeopathy versus water, placebo. He found an odds ratio of 2.45. For those you are not accustomed to this kind of data, it says that it's a little more than twice as effective as water. And the confidence interval, which this means if one is excluded, it means that this is statistically significant. He did some afterthoughts here, took away depending on quality, but he still found that it was statistically significant. So the conclusion from this is that homeopathy is more effective against disease than water, right? Yeah. Now, 4 years later came another meta-analysis from Kucherat. He came to a different conclusion. And now we're going to take a look at how we came to that conclusion. European clinical, about the same studies. Of course, not very much had happened in the body of clinical trials during these 4 years. He excluded most of it. He excluded 86% of the trials. Sometimes I can understand him, sometimes I cannot. No, this is definite endpoint unclear. I can understand that those studies are excluded. The other ones, I don't understand why he took them away, but okay, he did. And he had a strange way of combining p-values, so there was not a regular meta-analysis. He came to his p-values in some different way. But even based on 17 studies, he had a p-value looking like this, which is very, very strong. It is one risk out of 3.6 risks out of 10,000 that this favorable result of homeopathy could be explained by chance. So that is, to me, a very strong result. Now, he didn't report this. This was not his key result, which it should be. He started a sequential removal of study based on what he called quality. Now, we can discuss this, but he arrived finally at only 5 studies. 5 studies out of more than 100, so it had taken away almost everything. And he stopped taking away study when the p-value just became non-significant, which really told us what he was looking for, right? My criticism to this is this will happen with any material. If you take away 95% of your data, the significance will sooner or later be lost. So this is inherent in your procedure. It doesn't need to have anything with quality at all to do. Okay, what do we learn from this? The meta-analysis, authors may play around with data until they get the result they want, or dare to publish. And dare to publish, that's where I think we're going to discuss this more, because it is difficult to become accepted in the academic world if you publish something that is positive for homeopathy. But that's a different story. But you can play around with it. And the easiest way to do is to take away almost all the material. We call it in statistics a type 2 error. The only correct way to perform a meta-analysis, in my mind, is to define what you want to do from the start. You decide your inclusion and exclusion criteria, which should be clearly defined in your study. Then you include the studies, you lock the file, it's locked, and the outcome of your study is exactly that. It shouldn't be anything else. So if you're allowed to begin a secondary exclusion process after you arrive at your after you have decided what you want to do, allow yourself to do a secondary exclusion process. You can create anything you want. Afterthoughts may be reported, but in very low key. Call it exploratory analysis, at least in the studies where I'm active. Okay, this is the third study that I'm going to report to you in detail. It's really the worst example of this play around with data. It's from 2005. It's very often cited. Begins to be old now, but we take a look at how they did the same thing. Okay, it was about the same studies as Linde. Not very much had happened in 8 years. They identified 165 studies. And they did excluded crossover studies. I didn't know this is a very strong layout, so they shouldn't be excluded. But it was because they compared their data with conventional treatment studies also. I won't go into depth with that. We'll focus on homeopathy now. So his final number was 110. Comparing homeopathy treatments of any kind with water, right? We don't get to know the result from these 110 trials. Here he reports in his discussion that, or we understand that this must have been very positive for homeopathy. But he didn't publish that, so we didn't get to know the result. Now he excluded studies, now down to 21. So from 110, he took away 80%, and we don't really get to know exactly why. He doesn't tell us the criteria for excluding trials. He came down to 21 studies. Again, we didn't know the result of this one. He started a third exclusion process based on size. And I'll get back to this because he believes that larger studies are better than small ones. And I don't think so. So I'll get back to this. But he arrived at final number 8 studies, still in favor of homeopathy, but not significant. And then he stopped. As you see, that was he was looking for. He wanted to report a non-significant result. He turned the odds ratio upside down for some reason. This is 13% favor of homeopathy, but as you see, the confidence interval includes 1, so it's not statistically significant. One plot he used, we're going to take a look at this. This is a funnel plot. It is a way to present studies. Each point here is one study. Odds ratio is 1. That means that the homeopathic treatment has the same effect as water. So all points that are to the left here means that homeopathic treatments are better than water, and those to the right here shows that the water is superior. So you see the most studies are to the right here. And on the y-axis you see standard error. That means that large studies have a smaller standard error. Then small studies have a higher value. So these are small studies. And he argues that as we come to larger studies, the benefit of homeopathy is being lost because it's coming close to 1 here, and then it has no effect. Now what is wrong with this is that it's a mixture of diseases. It's a mixture of diseases. This is designed only for studies focusing on the same disease. And the basic idea behind it is that is small studies that are negative are underreported. So there's a publication bias, so that they say that every positive study here that's small is mirrored by a negative study here that is unpublished. Okay, that's quite fiction, but that is the argument behind this plot. But if you have done clinical science yourself, you know that you must start with an ethics application, right? And you are required to have something called a power analysis there. And if you have an expected strong effect, which in homeopathy would be like hay fever or influenza maybe, you are required to have a fairly small material, because it's unethical to make a study larger than you need to prove your point. But if you expect a poor effect or unknown effect, then you can size your study larger. It means that up here we have studies where we have an unexpected poor effect. And here we have studies that have an expected good effect. So by putting the different diseases together, different treatments together like this, you have a selection of studies with expected poor effects up here. So it is a wrong application of the funnel plot, which is designed really only for studies of the same disease. Okay, a funnel plot cannot be used for the reasons that I've said in the Shang study. Still it appeared in the Lancet. Yeah. I think the Lancet was quite pushed to publish something that was contradictory to the Linde work. That is my suspicion. Okay, but if we go to evaluations of a method that has been done here, I think one should first start with analyzing the data in a meta-analysis or a systematic review, and that should be very objective. You should not confuse yourself with opinion here. And it's best performed by somebody who doesn't have any career-like interest in coming out with a specific result. But then in stage 2, when we formulate recommendations, it's here that subjective points can come in. We can say that we don't want to publish, we don't work with homeopathy because we don't believe in it. Could be one point. It's dangerous. Could be one. Adverse effects are very serious. It could be too expensive or whatever. But you couldn't say that it doesn't have any effect, because that isn't true. All these studies I showed you should have reported that homeopathy has effect that is much stronger than water. But it didn't report that. Yeah. Because they didn't dare or whatever. So the roles are being mixed up by these authors. This is an objective method. You should be absolutely independent of the result. Your subjective points should come in here. Is there a bias? Yeah, we can say the Shang study, the key author, the final author, had published a very, very negative article about homeopathy. And if you've done that, you shouldn't do a meta-analysis, I think, because you're very likely to manipulate with the data, and it's easy to do so in this setting. You may wonder, is these Kucherat and Shang studies, are they fakes? Are they fakes? Do you think? I don't think they're fakes, because they tell you what they're doing. They tell you what they're doing. Okay, they lack some information here and there, but you get to see how they work with it. But it's bad science. It's very bad science. So you should be able to say that very clearly. It's bad science. Okay, we're going to take a look at Ernst. He's a skeptic who is specialized in meta-analysis of complementary treatments. I looked a little on what he's doing. He's typically excluding almost all the material when he makes a meta-analysis. And if he concludes there's no evidence, there's too little data, because there's almost nothing left, right? If there's still a statistically significant benefit, he concludes that it's not convincing. So you're always coming to the same result. We're going to take a look at some final up argumentation here. that Linde made a follow-up study based on quality from his original work when he classified the works according to Yadad scores. And we're going to see how Ernst handles the same material. First, Yadad score, I don't like it very much because it's a kind of quality measure, but it's very much focused on how you randomize your data. So I think it's overemphasized on that. Now, quality has a lot more to go with it. But okay, this was done 20 years ago. And if you organize the data from Linde's original study according, you say 89 studies according to the Yadad score, the best studies, highest quality studies are here. And these are a little poorer with regard to blinding and randomization. And there's a trend here in the data. So if we plot them, you can see that the poorest studies are up here. They are more favorable to homeopathy, and then they get a little less positive here. But in the Yadad score 5, they get better again. So the result for the very best studies are really pretty good. It's a odds ratio of 2. So that's twice as effective as water. So this is the line of unity. Here, water has the same effect as homeopathy, and homeopathy, the positive results are up here and the negative results are there. Ernst suggested this plot. He made a regression line here between these studies. And he said that, okay, this is the regression, and the best studies should have a odds ratio of 1. Okay, if you go on a course in statistics, you should learn that you cannot extrapolate uncritically to data outside your material, right? But here we do have a result from the Yadad score 5. But he holds that it should be 1. So he prefers virtual data instead of the real data, and he argues very strongly for this. So now he does a systematic review a couple of years later, and he gets this point on 2 lines. First, he takes the Linde study that I just showed you, and he said that the mean OR for the best studies was not in favor of homeopathy. Yeah, this is if you take the regression line. Yeah, but you take the real data, it was really much better for homeopathy, right? There was clear evidence that studies with better methodology tended to yield less positive results. Yeah, that's true, but not for the best ones, right? And now he cites his own meta-analysis from 2000, or his own systematic review, and it goes to the same regression line, but he's again commenting that a strong linear correlation between the Yadad score and the odds ratio. He concludes that homeopathic remedies are in fact placebos, but we do have the data for the best studies. It disregards that. Extrapolation of this correlation implies that the most rigorous studies yield an effect size of 0. But I mean, how can you ever believe him? How can you ever believe this man? I'm just confused. I know I'm not used to argumentation in homeopathy, but I'm very used to teaching doctors in my hospital evidence-based medicine. I just shake my head when I see this. We see finally Kuchrat, how he argues with the Kuchrat. He admits here that the p-value was very, very strong. He said there's some evidence. This is not some evidence. This is very, very strong. And he said that he takes the expression or the final conclusion from the authors. The Kuchrat said the strength of evidence was estimated to be low. And how can you ever say this is low? Again, I just shake my head. So I find a lot of this go around the point argumentation that is not sound. Why publishing bad science? You may wonder that. We have an old-time conflict here between the academics and the homeopathic society because the academics say that we don't understand how this works. It's non-biological effects, if so. And these pushes are sort of made stronger by the skeptics who believe that they do science a favor. And the academics, they're just happy. They sit back and let the skeptics do the killing work, like we did with the Vidar clinics. You know. Just one example. I'm sure that you have a lot of these examples yourself. Also, I feel that those who want to publish something favorable to homeopathy who is within the academic society will have trouble because of this old-time conflict. And this is all very, 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 very sad that we have it this way. We also have other reports that came later, of course, and you get the same go about the points. This is Australia report for 2015. It's another, I would say, strategy because the skeptics always want more and they're never satisfied. You can give 100 studies, they always want more. Of course, there's a lot more to say about this, and I know this organization has also been very helpful in putting data together. And I'm sure we'll hear much more about this during this Congress. But my talk was really intended to summarize my feelings when I read the literature that is not very serious, in particular from the part of the academics, and sometimes I get really ashamed. This exclusion process is really just a play. It doesn't tell you the truth. Because we got flip-flop phenomena, it makes very much difference which studies you have. If you have only 5 studies, maybe you have 6 studies, maybe you change the composition, your conclusion could be very different. So it's not robust. The final results are not robust. Beware of meta-analysis that play around with data. My advice to you is to read the studies very carefully. Don't just read the conclusions. Just don't read the abstract. Try to plow into the details. What did they really do? And try to find flaws, but I'm sure because you will find them. And I think we're in, actually we had a meeting yesterday talking about meta-analysis, and go into meta-analysis more into specific diseases. I think is more fruitful at this time. This old comparison with water is a bit outdated because you say that you will never win. Because there's so many ways to flaw meta-analysis. So with those words, I would like to thank you for your attention, and we'll be open to questions.